who around us are the ones that you would consider, yeah, I have some difficult conversations to have in my life? Subordinates at work, colleagues, family, children, parents, spouses. Right? And think about, why does that feel so difficult? Because we care so much about those relationships. Even at work, you don't have to like your colleagues necessarily. You don't have to be friends, but there's a relationship there where you two share something. And it's the company mission, or it's the job at hand. So anytime there is an investment of yourself in that common place, especially when your heart is involved, as in family, as in spouses, as in all of those friends and relationships, they're difficult because we get afraid, right? We have something at stake here. So what are some things that make you, if you think about this, and I'm not sure if you think about these difficult conversations in terms of boiling it down to, what am I afraid of here? What is at stake? So if you think about one of the more recent conversations that you've had that you would call a difficult conversation, what was it that was at stake? What was it that felt like you had to take a risk in approaching the topic at hand? What was the risk to you personally? Does anybody want to share anything there? I'll share. One thing that I find myself running into, difficult conversations, for example, at work, because I don't ever want my boss to know that I can't do everything, right? So that may, Karen knows nothing about this, by the way, because I was perfect when I worked for her. But just kidding, she could tell you a lot of things. And I think that this is something some of you may relate to, right? I may be, not asking for help when I need it. I may be saying, no, everything's good. Nope, I'm working on that. Yep, I'll get that to you. Yep. And inside you start panicking and freaking out. Your boss is probably freaking out too, going, oh boy, we need to have a conversation because this isn't happening. So think about the difficult conversation from your side saying, I need to ask for help. So the hands start sweating and I get hot and I'm like, I don't want to have this conversation. What's at risk for me personally there? And this is me personally, this really is. It could be different for any one of you in a different situation, but she's not going to think I'm competent. She's going to lose faith in my abilities. I'm going to look stupid. It really can get to that part where all of the negative talk in your head kind of takes over. Once again, emotion is hijacking logic. Whereas if I could remove that, if I could take that step back and say, okay, hold on, that's emotions. What is really the issue at hand? Okay, the issue at hand is I have this and this and this and this going on, and I can handle this and this. I need help with these other things. So if I can look at those things objectively as if they are pieces of paper on a table, and I can shuffle them around and point to it and say, this is an issue, and this is an issue, then it takes me off the table. It takes my feelings or my fears off the table so that I can address the issue at hand. So those are the kinds of things when you're thinking about, you start to get those physical reactions. You know why you get those physical reactions? It's the same reaction that you would get if you were being chased by a hungry bear. Well, to a degree, to a degree. I've never been chased by a hungry bear, but I'm pretty sure I'd feel pretty hot and sweaty and my heart would be racing. But the reason for that is it's sort of an instinctual thing. When we feel any type of threat to our well-being, and if our security, if our self-esteem, if our confidence is one of those things that's being threatened, there's a little part in your brain that kicks in and says, oh, it's time to fight, or it's time to flee, or it's time to just freeze where you are. Because that's kind of, when you're looking at these emotionally charged conversations that have to happen, They call it the reptilian brain. It's that part of your brain that hasn't evolved with the rest of us. It's very instinctual. And that's where the physical reactions come from. So a lot of times it really can help you to kind of recognize and think about this. Everybody feels it kind of a different way. I get a pit in my stomach. Some people get a lot of tension in their shoulders. Some people will start, fidgeting, or who knows. But if you can recognize that before it takes over, again, one more point of awareness for you to say, oh yeah, what's going on here? Because when you're in it, you're not thinking about what's going on here. You're thinking about, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to survive this? And it's one thing when you're the person who has to instigate that difficult conversation. It's a whole nother thing when you're on the other side of someone instigating a difficult conversation with you, right? What do you think is easier, starting the difficult conversation or being on the receiving end?
I think it's both.
Both? Did I hear a couple one way or the other? You think starting is easier?
No, it's harder.
Oh, it's harder. It's hard. It is. I think it is too. What do you feel when somebody brings up a difficult conversation to you?
It really depends on how clear they are.
How clear about
What the issue is.
About the issue.
Because they may be having a hard time getting to the point and not being very direct. They may be,
They're not factual.
yeah.
Not factual. And what did you have to add?
I was thinking that the person starting the conversation may have been thinking about this for a long time and maybe making lists about things that need to be discussed, and the other person may not have a clue that any of that was going on. They might, but they may not.
I would agree with that, and I'm going to guarantee that as many of you said that you've had difficult conversations as recently as today, you probably still have a whole other collection of conversations that have to happen. You're just putting them off because maybe they're a little more difficult than you want to deal with right now. And if that is the case, letting these things pile up, clearly you're not doing something here, right? So, again, when you are on the receiving end of a difficult conversation, just take a moment and think. I like what Maria said. They probably are having trouble relaying what's going on. So maybe you guys today on the other end of a difficult conversation can help that person out and say, wait a second, what is it that you really want to talk about? So that's just like a sidebar here, side note. But generally speaking, if you are coming into a situation that has to be addressed, and you're thinking about, how do I do it? Okay, I recognize my physical signs that I'm getting worked up about this. I'm asking myself, what is the fear? What is at risk here? And when you identify what that fear, what that risk is all about, then you can kind of put that aside and say, oh, okay, all right, I get that. So what's the issue at hand? Because you got to remove that emotion so that you can so that you can kind of separate from any stories that go with it. When you say all of these things, they keep backing up, piling up and piling up, you'll start to think about, it's holding on to it for so long. There are two ways you can react when there's a difficult conversation at stake or at hand. One of them is, and has anyone heard of the book Crucial Conversations? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a really good book. And the one thing that they say is, you have two directions that you'll typically go when you're dealing with a difficult conversation, and that's going to be to silence or violence. And I don't mean violence like someone's going to throw a brick at your head. That's not necessarily what I mean. But silence being, I am completely removing myself from this. I'm going to, you're dissociating, you're not addressing it, you're ignoring it. Whereas the violent side is, you're coming out there and you're not being productive at all, and you're like, you're an idiot, why did you think you could do that? Okay, what was that? What is that about? So when you think about, which one are you? Are you silence or are you violence? Are you a combination of both? And what happens when we do? And I'm going to stick with silence because I think that is probably one of the more prevalent reactions in whatever manner you go to silence. When I was growing up, it was all about the silent treatment. That was the thing in our house. Oh, I'm getting the silent treatment. You know, and growing up, you're like, yeah, take that, not talking. So, you know, what actually happens there? Not much. There's not much improving if nobody's talking, right? And if you think about, okay, I'm going to let this go. It's not a big deal. I'm just not even going to, I won't even address it. So then the next time it happens, oh my God, forget it. I'm just not even dealing with it. Third time, fourth time, fifth time. At what point does it become, oh God, I got to address this? So you go from silence to, whoa, like you're completely exploding over here, you know? It's like a dam. You've let it build up and up and up and up and up, and now psh, it's all going to come out, right? And it's going to pick up a lot of stuff along the way too, because now it's not just that one thing that you've been quiet and holding off, and you've been very noble and just dealing with it and not saying anything. Baloney, that's not noble. Think about this. If there's something to say and you catch yourself saying, oh no, no, no. Oh no, I'm not going to. That's not noble. That's kind of like irresponsible if it comes right down to it. If you think about it, if there's an issue at hand and you're choosing to ignore it, why are you choosing to ignore it? What does that relationship mean to you? Because in the end, it's got to be not about you, but about the issue. So thinking about, okay, maybe I shouldn't ignore this. And if I talk about it now, this one time, maybe that'll help. Okay? So they say, change what you want and you'll change how you act. And this is from one of the authors of Change Anything. And I thought, that is brilliant. Change what you want and you'll change how you act. So again, I'm talking about this awareness. You're finding yourself having to deal with a difficult situation. What do you really want? Because sometimes what you want when you're approaching a difficult conversation is you want to be right. Or you want to save face, right? Or you don't want to be challenged, right? Because you're right. I don't want to get into this conversation right now because I don't want to be challenged. I'm right. I want to be right. Now, if I change what I want, if I want for a problem to be resolved, that's a completely different feeling than I want to be right. I want to save face. I want to be this person's friend for the rest of my life. I want this person to love me. I want. What is it that you really want that's going to move the situation forward? So thinking about, I just love that whole saying, change what you want and you'll change how you act. Because if you go from wanting to be right to wanting to be productive, that changes. Because you can't just go in there and be right. You can be a collaborative part of a discussion between people, and you could even really kind of be right in the end anyway, but that's not the issue at hand, right? So you have to ask yourself, when you're finding yourself in this situation, what do I really want here? What does the other person want? That's the other side. Remember when I opened this up, we're talking about conversation. It is a two-way street. So you can really only control yourself and your approach to any difficult conversation, but remember that there is someone on the other side of this, right? And that's where that difficulty comes in, because you don't know what they're going to say, and you don't know how they're feeling. So if you can change what you want out of the conversation, you can invite that person in with you and find the thing together that you both are having the issue with. You may be the person who recognizes a problem. Maybe you just assume the other person doesn't recognize the same problem. How will you know? It's got to be part of that discussion, part of that conversation. So changing what you want to understand what that other person feels or wants or needs to do. You need to make observations about what has been going on and take the judgment out of it, right? Remember, we want to talk about facts. We want to talk about something that's for real and tangible that we can actually have an effect on, because you can't change that other person or people, right? You might want to sometimes, but it hasn't really proven to work very well. And when I talk about what you want for yourself, how does your behavior reflect what it is that you want? If you say, no, I just want us to figure this out together. But is your behavior saying, move over, let me get this done? Right? And this all takes a little bit of introspection, a little bit of awareness, and saying, if I say this is what I want, what am I actually doing? How does my behavior reflect what I say I want? And that's one of the funny things, like in coaching, people will say, oh, well, I want to do this and I want to do that. And as the coach, the objective person on the outside, I can say, oh, well, you say you want this, but these actions lead to this. How does that work? You know? So be aware for that for yourself, how your behavior reflects what you say you want. And because in a difficult conversation, there is a common ground. And you may have to kind of dig to find what it is. If it's work, I always think work conversations are easier than the personal ones. Because at least at work, there's something that has to happen. There's a measurable outcome. There's a job. There's a task at hand that needs to be addressed. And if you're working with someone else and that's a difficult situation, you can talk about the task. And if I can take that, you know, on the personal side too. Yeah, if it's about the dishwasher, I can make it about the dishwasher and not that my husband can be lazy. Don't tell my mother-in-law I said that.
How did you remember I knew her?
Oh, I'll always remember that. So, you know, that's kind of what you want to think. And I think people generally know, you know, make it about facts. It's not about the person. But it's so hard sometimes, isn't it? What about difficult conversations with someone you don't even like?
That's a bugger.
That's a bugger. It can be. But you have to come to that, even if you don't like that person, you're having the conversation because there is a shared outcome. There's some sort of common purpose there that has to be dealt with.